Hello, I'm Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman, and I am here with the Office of Planning and Zoning for another one of our virtual town halls we call Build Back Better. And I have to say that it feels a little bit strange this week to be talking about long-term decisions about land use in Anne Arundel County when we have so many urgent current issues that we're dealing with, having to make tough decisions about what to do about the increase in our coronavirus cases, having to confront the issue of racial injustices and a recent incident in Anne Arundel County with our police in Odenton. And I want people to know that government continues. We do the work of government. I have found that you have to learn to juggle a lot of balls. But we did have a town hall last night on the coronavirus numbers, and we, which you can see on Facebook and watch that from last night. And then tomorrow night, we're gathering once again to hear from residents about their thoughts and their pain after seeing what was on the front page of the Capitol this morning of a white officer with his knee on a African-American suspect, doing a kind of policing that we don't support in this county. But here we are tonight talking about an issue that really does matter long term. And so when we say build back better, we really mean from the pandemic. But to build back better it's an attitude. The pandemic is showing us things that we'll be talking about a little bit tonight about how that might change land use in the future. But we're in the middle in Anne Arundel County of putting together a long-term plan, the general development plan, the 20-year plan for land use. So we're going to talk about that, but we're also doing some things that really have changed the way land use decisions are made in the county. And we're going to review some of that, how development applications are being reviewed now, how we're looking at adequate public facilities before development happens, making sure we have infrastructure, talking about redevelopment, and changing the code, changing Anne Arundel County code so that it keeps up with the times. So that we can protect the land of what we want to protect and that we can do redevelopment where we want to do redevelopment. So I have the team with me here, the team that's responsible for a lot of the work through the Office of Planning and Zoning. And I'm not gonna, I think I'll introduce you as you begin to speak, but I do want to first introduce Steve Kaiser, who's the planning officer, the person in charge of the department, the person who takes the heat from every side every time a decision gets made about land use. So thank you, Steve. Do you want to say anything before we jump in on the GDP to open us up about your team and what you've been doing?
No, we have, it's great to be here. Again, Steve Kaiser, Planning and Zoning Officer. I've now been working with Mr. Pittman for a year. We're heavily involved in a variety of very, very large policy objectives. I'm really not going to say much because we've got the team here who's really the subject matter experts in each of the areas. Getting us started in a moment, unless you have more to say, Mr. Pittman, but Christina Pompa and Michael Stringer to talk about where we're at with the GDP, the interactive tool that folks will be able to participate in, and some region plans. So it's interesting stuff.
Let me introduce them before you jump over to them, though, because
sure.
you have a pretty noteworthy team, and I have to say about you. We call him SKZ around the office. SKZ has some great people who are here already, and he's brought in some other people. But one of the things about all of them, and I was looking at your educational experience, all of you, and when you were in school, I think all of you were studying the environment, natural resources. A bunch of you are graduates now of the Climate Academy. And when I came in, I said that I wanted to have Office of Planning and Zoning that not only didn't see developers as their clients or even just neighborhoods as their clients, but actually the natural environment as their client as well. And so So we've got you with your 30 years of experience, Steve. And you have more degrees than I want to go into. You seem to keep getting master's degrees in just about everything, and a lot of experience. And then Christina Pompa, who is the Deputy Planning and Zoning Officer, the number 2, with her master's in environmental policy from the University of Michigan School of Natural Resources, and also a bachelor's in economics. And then we're going to have with her Michael Stringer, who's a fairly new addition, started a month before the shutdown from the pandemic, started in February. So you got to know your coworkers for a little bit before you were locked in your home. And Michael is 15 years in the business, specializes in community engagement and planning for redevelopment in areas with environmental concerns, and has helped communities develop award-winning plans for revitalization and structural economic changes, and for resiliency to flooding and sea level rise. So I'm not surprised that Steve hired you out of the applicants, and we're glad to have you because we have some serious work to do in that area. And Steve grew up in Anne Arundel County and went to Severna Park High School. Also environmental science at Rutgers, and a master's in conservation biology and sustainable development at the University of Maryland. So this is a crew who is doing this work because they, like I, really do care about the environment that sustains us. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina and Michael to talk about where we are in the process of developing our general development plan.
Okay. Hi, my name is Christina Pompa. I'm a Deputy Planning and Zoning Officer with the Office of Planning and Zoning. Michael Stringer and I are going to tag team this a little bit. You know, the pandemic, one of the things that it has done to us is it's given us an opportunity to reinvent how we engage stakeholders in the planning process. And we have some exciting things that we want to talk about tonight, specifically our upcoming online open house that's part of the GDP. And then after we talk a little bit about the GDP, I'll talk about what we've done with our community meetings for development projects. But with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Michael to talk a little bit about the GDP and the online open house.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christina. And thank you, Mr. Pittman, for that lovely introduction. Yes, I'm very excited to be working with Anne Arundel County at this time. I've been working for nonprofits, local government, and most recently in the private sector out in the Pacific Northwest after growing up here in Anne Arundel County. So very excited to be kind of coming back home and helping to work on these important issues with this great team and this great moment to be addressing these topics in this county. The general development plan, we're naming it Plan 2040 for this round out because we're looking 20 years in the horizon now. Plan 2040 is Anne Arundel County's comprehensive plan. So it guides land use in the county, capitalizes on the infrastructure assets, and helps also identify critical areas for conservation. This is a tremendous opportunity for the community to share their ideas on how to shape the future of the county. And it touches on a lot of topics that are addressed in some of these other Build Back Better town halls and a lot of community conversations, issues like affordable housing. We include a number of goals and policies that are based on ideas we've heard from the community and organizations like Arundel Community Development Services about how we can most effectively make housing affordable for all in the county. Issues like traffic, always a top concern out here. And building on the work of the Transportation Functional Master Plan, Move Anne Arundel, that was adopted by the council at the end of last year, incorporating those policies, building on that, and doing that alignment of those land use policies with the transportation policies. And also, of course, a big emphasis on the environment. One of the most common topics that we heard about when we have been engaged in the community over the last 2+ years of this process has been about environmental protection. Water quality, forest conservation. We've heard these issues again and again as they've come up in multiple policy discussions in the county. We've also been taking a social and racial equity lens as we develop this work as well. looking at these policies and seeing how we can make sure that they are implemented equitably across the county, that communities, no matter where they are getting the support and services that they need to be successful. And we're also looking at this with a climate resiliency and sustainability lens of making sure that we're thinking about that triple bottom line of environment, economy, and community together as we develop these policies, and laying a policy foundation for the county to continue some of the work it's begun looking at the impacts of climate change and resiliency to sea level rise. This has been, as I mentioned, a major opportunity for community engagement. And in response to community members and to the direction of this administration, we have greatly expanded the community engagement efforts in this planning process. It began in 2017. There have been some big efforts like 8 countywide listening sessions that were attended by over 400 people. And that was coupled with an online survey, also reached over 400 people. And then we've also had in last year a series of 17 small area visioning forums attended by over 500 people, and an online survey that was accessed by more than 1,600 people. We've also made efforts to engage youth. We've engaged some high schools in some of their unique programs and brought together a forum of high school students last spring to think about how they see the future of Anne Arundel County too, and get a lot of tremendous creative ideas. Now, as we're getting to the point of kind of distilling all that feedback we've received from the community members, and also, of course, from the standing citizen advisory committee that was set up to guide this process, a 20+ member group that represented people from around the county, as well as environmental and real estate interests. Distilling all that information into draft goals, policies, and implementing strategies, as well as an update to the land use plan. And as we were preparing to roll all this out this summer, we, of course, have the pandemic. So we've been retooling, as Christina said, how we try to engage the community in a way that's going to be effective to educate them and inform them about the work that's been done and provide them with opportunities to give their feedback and engagement. So I'd like to give a brief overview of what that tool is. This is our online open house that was custom designed for this process. It's been a tremendous learning curve for the county to be able to adopt this. We've been accessing our great folks in our Office of Information Technology, our Geographic Information Systems folks, as well as our land use planners, and beginning to engage our Office of Community Engagement Constituency Services as well to make sure that we are messaging this well, that we are packaging it well, and that we're going to get a lot of people to access this. This is an opportunity for us to put out the major elements of Plan 2040 in draft form to get people's feedback before we actually put the formal plan document out for review. As you can see here, the website is set up with a series of tabs at the top that cover the big areas of some introduction information with background about the plan. It includes a discussion of why we're doing this online open house in the first place, make sure that we're respecting the social distancing requirements we need to obey. Also, we include right up front some thoughts about what we've heard from the community. Increasingly, I'm finding it to be more and more important to not just summarize what we've heard from the community, but also to reply back to them and say, this is exactly how we've taken your ideas and built them into the plan. So this is a brief overview graphic to share that, and they'll see more of that as they get into the online open house. We've also shared in here the vision and the themes that the Citizen Advisory Committee have developed as kind of the guiding light for how this plan should be developed. Their vision for what the county should look like in the future. And one that's always challenging with the general development plan is people want to see where the building's going to be. I have an idea what the building's going to look like, and a comprehensive plan like this is really a policy setting document. So it's a lot more of a word picture of how we want the county to be developed. And this vision and these themes speak about some of the key issues that came out of the community and from the Citizen Advisory Committee. Things like making sure that we are developing communities that are resilient and sustainable to both economic change and climate change. That we're thinking about new and improved infrastructure, that we're thinking about the technology innovations that are happening in transportation, making sure that we're investing in infrastructure for biking, walking, and mass transit, as well as improving our roads and our stormwater infrastructure. Thinking about our economic future, an important focus now for redevelopment during the recession, that we're thinking about the types of jobs we want to be able to promote, both innovative as well as protecting our traditional industries, and thinking about where we want that growth to occur. Thinking about the character of our community. Arundel is blessed with having this great diversity of landscapes, you know, from our more urban centers to our rural landscapes, to our suburban neighborhoods, waterfronts on the east, to our newer developments on the west, and these big infrastructure pieces like Fort Meade and BWI. So making sure that we're thinking about the character of those places, building on our unique assets for the future. And also that we're thinking about inclusive, equitable, and responsive government. This has been a process that's been very engaging for the Citizen Advisory Committee, as well as all these community members who participated in these forums previously, and to make sure that we're setting that tone and walking that walk, walking that talk of making sure that we're listening and responding to the community. Through this planning process, one of the big pieces of a comprehensive plan like this are a set of goals, policies, and strategies. For Plan 2040, we're organizing them in 4 categories: natural environment, built environment, healthy communities, and a healthy economy. And in total, there's over 400 of these goals, policies, and strategies. There's a big work program ahead of us for the next 20 years. Rather than have the community try to comment on all 400 of those, we've provided them the opportunity in this website to be able to download that whole big list if they want to get into the details, but also just to comment on the high-level goals. So as they scroll down in this, they can see what's covered in these chapters. For example, this is the environment. We talk about our environmentally sensitive areas, about forests and greenways and priority agricultural preservation areas, water resources, sustainability. We give some information about some of the challenges we face, like water quality, loss of forests, sea level rise, and also some of the great opportunities like our stream and wetland restoration efforts at the county, our efforts to preserve farmland and forests. And then we provide them the opportunity to comment and to access these goals directly and provide their thoughts on, do they support these? Do they not support them? And to provide open comments as well of, what do you think we've missed? What are the ideas that you would like to see in here? How can we improve this? So they have the opportunity to comment on all these different goal areas for the natural environment, healthy communities, healthy economy, and the built environment. One of the other big pieces of Plan 2040 is the planned land use map. This sets the template for how land is developed in the county. The planned land use map designates broad categories of land, you know, for residential development, for conservation, for industrial and commercial purposes. It's similar to the zoning map, which people are more familiar with, but the difference is that the planned land use map is a policy setting map. It guides and gives direction. The zoning map is the one that actually has the regulations attached to it. But the zoning map and the planned land use map are to be in compliance. And so the land use map comes first, and the zoning map will be updated to make sure that these align. This part of the website gives the opportunity for people to look at the planned land use map and to be able to compare it between what we've proposed for Plan 2040 and what the last General Development Plan 2009 had. So you can see on the right-hand side the 2009 colors and 2040 colors. So there's a lot to look into in this, and we provide some documentation that people can look at as well to learn more about the methodology, the principles that are behind how we define these land uses. And as we refined this land use plan for this iteration, we also did 2 important things. We allowed property owners to apply to the county to say, hey, I want my planned land use to change so that I can develop my property in a different way. So we accepted those applications in the beginning of the year. We held a public comment period to solicit public thoughts on those applications. And through this part of the application, we actually allow people to then look at these specific parcels and see what the applicant asked for in terms of what kind of designation they wanted. In this case, they wanted to move these yellow colors are for residential over to a commercial, which would have been designated in red, and to see what the staff is recommending, what their analysis was. You can click on a summary sheet and see that analysis, all overview of the data that we looked at, as well as a summary of the public comments that were received. And then we allow the public to also comment again to say, do you agree with how staff have analyzed this? If not, what other land use would you like to see applied, and what reasons would you give for that? We can also, through this application.
Can I just say, wow, this is really cool before you continue?
Thank you.
This is really cool. It's the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, this has been a lot of work from the folks on our tech side to be able to put this together. And I think this is going to really be a powerful tool for our community members to respond. And, you know, there's balancing that we put in this of you can overwhelm people with information on these things. We could give you all the detailed analysis that we did. We can give you a book, but we try to pare it down to make it accessible, to give people set options so they can easily respond, and that we can then easily and efficiently and effectively analyze the data and have actionable response to it. So you can comment on these land use change applications. Staff also did a comprehensive review. We looked at all over 200,000 parcels in the county to see, does that land use align with where our goals and vision are for Plan 2040? So there's a handful of these properties in here too, where staff have recommended a change. And again, community members can comment on that.
And let me just say that this is so cool that it's in advance of rezoning. So this is still a planning document, but once you have a land use map, it's going to be really hard to get a rezoning that doesn't comply with the land use map. So this is where the residents really have the input that I think people were frustrated that they didn't have in the past. You know, we had our small area plans and we thought we were preserving certain land, and then an upzoning would happen, and how did that happen, and who paid who off, and politics, and the campaign contributions. I mean, the whole system was just sort of ripe for corruption. And now we have this process where people can dig into their own neighborhood, have input, know what's going on. And I'm sure it's frustrating for some land speculators who bought property they were hoping to develop, and it's more difficult now to do it quite secretly behind closed doors. But I think this is certainly what I was asking for. So thank you.
Great. Well, with that, Christina, do you want to add any additional comments?
Michael, when do you think that this is going to be available for the public?
Yeah, we are currently beta testing this with our Citizen Advisory Committee. Let them work out the bugs and tell us if there's anything that needs to be improved with it to make it more functional. And then we're planning to be able to roll this out in the beginning of August.
Okay.
All right. We'll have to do a virtual ribbon cutting when it rolls out. For a virtual location.
County Executive, would you like me to go right into some discussion about the region plans?
Yeah, and let me just say before you do that this was another brainchild of somebody, probably that SKZ guy, or maybe a group of you, I don't know. But when we had the small area planning in the past, and people were so frustrated when the small area plans weren't really used for the zoning or the general development plan. They were sort of ignored. They were put in a shelf. And I heard a lot of people say that they should never have been done because they were just a bunch of crazy residents who were trying to, stick their nose into the development business. And so people were frustrated. So when we started the general development plan process, it was too late to really do a whole small area planning or regional area planning process in advance. So instead, you came up with this plan, get the general development plan done, and then go into what is now going to be 9 regions, which to me, they make sense. They're sort of like areas of common interest, common characteristics for the most part. But the rezoning part, the really important part, doesn't happen until the regional plans happen. So it means rezoning will happen more slowly over time, but those communities will have a lot more opportunity to have input because it's more localized. So Yes, tell us about those regional plans.
Well, County Executive, you already stole half of my thunder because you know all about it. You know, the 16 small area plans were fabulous in concept, but it really takes an army of staff in the planning office to not only prepare those plans with stakeholder input, but then there's the whole implementation piece. And so now, through input from the Citizen Advisory Committee to the General Development Plan, they have a draft region plan, which I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. And my graphic is not quite as sexy as Michael's online open house, but this is the draft region planning area for the 9 regions. The Citizen Advisory Committee had a lot of input into this, and it really breaks the county into neighborhood units, which I think is very nice. And right now we have staff in the Office of Planning and Zoning to undertake 3 region plans at a time. So once the General Development Plan is adopted by the County Council, it is our goal to start 3 of the plans. Now the GDP is going to designate the order of the region plans. And that we're going to be discussing the order of the region plans with the Citizen Advisory Committee at their next meeting on Wednesday, the 29th. And it will get debated at the council level as well. And there are obviously, you know, there are many reasons why you may want to do one region plan first and another one last or towards the end. You could group region plans by geographic areas so that there's cross-pollination in a geographic area of the county. Or you could look at areas with the highest growth pressure and let them go first. Or I think one of the things you're going to find is that in the land use change applications, there were certain areas where staff recommended that the decision-making be put off to a region planning effort. So you may look at where were the most land use change applications, which regions did we put off the majority of those? So there are lots of different ways you could organize how the region plans go, and we do not have a draft order at this time. We will have a Citizen Advisory Committee for each one of these. And as Michael stated, we're working with the Office of Constituent Services to do some outreach so that when we get into the region planning effort, we have people who want to participate in those planning efforts. We do anticipate, depending on the complexity of each region plan, that they would take between 18 to 36 months to complete. And after they are adopted, we do envision having an implementation advisory committee established to then follow implementation of the region plans. And we also intend to do comprehensive rezoning as part of each region plan. So we would not, like we did after the 2009 GDP, do a comprehensive rezoning of the entire county at one time. And that's what we have on the region plans.
Excellent. So, and can you just mention for us what there are other components to the general development plan as well? Can anybody list those? There's the transportation plan.
Michael can probably answer that best. So he mentioned the 4 components of the general development plan. So traditional comprehensive plans, especially in the state of Maryland, we've been used to having transportation elements, land use element, sensitive resources element, water resources element. We have reorganized the general development plan for this plan 2040. I'm sorry if you hear the dog barking. We have reorganized by the 4 themes: the natural environment, the built environment. Help me, Michael.
Healthy communities and healthy economy.
Yes. And
And-
so all of those element pieces are within those topic areas.
Okay.
Yeah, and the
Okay.
idea of that organizational structure was to try to break down the silos that can develop between housing versus transportation versus the different chapters, but try to show the interconnectedness. And this is actually kind of inspired by work that the American Planning Association did in their guidance of how to integrate sustainable development principles into local land use plans.
Good. Okay, so I believe, Christina, are you going to also tell us about the new system for community meetings on development applications?
I am.
Why don't we do that next? Or is
Okay.
that the order you want to go in?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay.
County Executive, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again.
Okay. So when a subdivision application is submitted, one of the things that or before it's submitted, actually, you can correct me on the process and how it works, but the developers have to have a community meeting and notify residents within a certain area so that they can present a plan and hear comments. During the pandemic, obviously that was impossible. So
Right.
I think you guys have
So-
come up with an even better plan.
Yeah,
Tell
so Executive Order 19 basically shut down community meetings, and we started thinking that we were going to need a virtual answer to community meetings, but it's not as easy as just saying everybody can do Zoom meetings or, any of the other platforms. So what we did is we went to the drawing board to come up with a new process using a virtual platform that would allow community meetings to continue. And I think it ended up being a fabulous opportunity for us, because even when Executive Order 19 was terminated by Executive Order 25, which allowed gathering again, there were restrictions on the percentage of occupancy in any given location. And one of the things that our code requires for community meetings is that they take place within 5 miles of the development project. So if you can imagine that all the places you normally have community meetings now actually have reduced capacity. And if you have a very controversial project where you're expecting 100 people, but the closest place to you only will handle 50, then you're not going to be able to have your meeting there. So there is a little escape clause in the code that the planning director can determine if it's not feasible to have a meeting within 5 miles. And he made a blanket determination that it wouldn't be while we were still in this COVID situation, which allowed us to then move to a 100% virtual platform for community meetings. In order to do that, we had to build a totally new website, totally new process, totally new back-end architecture to support the whole system. And what we've done, can everybody see the screen I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay. So what we've done here is this is our community meeting website, and anybody can do a Google search for AACO community meetings, and the top response is going to be this web page. And the top part is really for stakeholders that want to be participating in meetings. We now have a community meeting calendar. We have at this time, I think, 32 projects that have community meetings planned. There are little up and down arrows here. So right now they're not in date order. I'm not sure what order they're in, but they're not in date order. So if you want them in date order, and what you'll find is that tonight we have our very first community meeting for the Pasadena Starbucks. It's starting at 7 p.m. tonight. So if you're not doing anything after the town hall and you want to check out what's going on in Pasadena, here's your link to do it. So Pasadena Starbucks, wow, look at all this information. This is all populated through online forms that we developed. And we've got a back-end database that's holding all this information, but we also have documents that are accessible to the public that have never been accessible before. They have the link to the virtual meeting. They've got a vicinity map, and they can see a detailed site plan for the Starbucks before the meeting ever happens. The other exciting thing about what we've got here is that once a meeting happens, the applicant has to send us a video link of the meeting that took place. Now, tonight's the first meeting, so this page is not populated yet. But if you can't get to your community meeting, you can come here the day after, anytime within 14 days after that meeting, and you can watch the video of the meeting. And then you can't see it now because we don't have a project here, but you're going to be able to submit comments directly to the applicant, and a copy is going to come to the Office of Planning and Zoning. After the meeting, after that 14-day period closes, when the applicants are taking comments and questions, the applicant is going to have to put together a summary that identifies how the questions have been answered. They'll have to provide meeting minutes. So it's a much more open, transparent, and robust process than we have ever had before. And I just want to let the public know, this bottom part talks about the fact that it's for meeting applicants. But the way we advertise this new meeting process was through a green notice. There's a link here to Green Notice 20-11 that sets out all the language and how we got to the point where we would allow these virtual community meetings. And just so you know, the Planning and Zoning Officer is going to talk about green notices. And anytime you're on a Planning and Zoning webpage, green notices are always over here on the right and very easily accessible. You can get the code language here about community notices. You can send a question in to OPZ community meetings at aacounty.org and have a staff member respond to you. You can read all the detailed information about the process here in these blue links. And then if you even want to see what the applicant has to submit to us, you can click on any one of these links and a form will pop up and you can see what they have to submit. And all of these forms are mentioned within the process mentioned in these links. So it is a significantly improved community meeting, hosting and process that I think brings a lot more transparency for stakeholders.
I think this pandemic has been great for your office. You guys have obviously been working really hard
Really
in the
hard.
last few months putting all this together. But I just want to say also that as I look back in the history of this county and the way community meetings were handled on development projects, and I know that there's this process of modifications where the planning officer can modify, basically help a developer get around the rules. And hundreds of community meeting requirements were waived in the past. I remember going to a community meeting about a project called the Enclave at Crofton, and there were about 300 residents there who said, this is the first we heard of this, and you say it's about to be approved. Well, it was because the first community meeting requirement had been waived. And then they found that lots of community meeting requirements were waived. And so rather than waiving them during the pandemic, you made them way better. And so this is definitely something we have to continue post-pandemic. It's so much more effective. And I think it'll be better for the developers. I would think that it's more efficient. They're going to have more input. There's no question about that. But it's so much more efficient.
Yeah, and I think that there are some advantages because if you're a developer and you're out of town, or even if you're coming from Western Maryland or wherever you may live, you don't have to drive to your community meeting now or fly to your community meeting. If you are a resident and you have, you can't drive at night because most of these meetings have to start sometime between 6 and 8 p.m. And if it's a community meeting in January and it's dark out, and if you can't drive at night, you can't get there. Well, you can either watch the meeting online or watch it later. So I think that there are significant advantages and disadvantages potentially for both sides. But I think it is a much more open and transparent process.
Yeah, it's what we've been asking for from day one. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
This is like Christmas.
We had
All right.
no idea.
No, I didn't know how much fun we were going to be having. All these new tools for community engagement. dream come true. All right, Steve, we just saw these green notices on the side of the screen, and that was something that I was also very excited about, that we started probably a year ago now, or close to. Tell us what they are.
Sure, thank you. Steve Kaiser, again, Planning and Zoning Officer. And I think I want to follow on with Christina and Michael's. You're seeing the broader picture items. And when Christina gets into the virtual community meetings, you can't underestimate or understate the role and the potential now for greater participation and transparency. And boss, if you remember the first time you and I ever had a conversation, and we talked about shared values. And one of the things you brought up was the need for much greater transparency and the opportunity for the public to participate more fully. And I obviously shared those views. You're seeing some of it now in the presentations you've had. And the next phase of that is what we're calling green notices. And I need to give you a little bit of background. Historically, when the Office of Planning and Zoning made an interpretation or created a policy, we shared it with the client who would be affected. Typically, that was the development community and no one else. It might be a memo to a group of developers, residential, non-residential. But the reality is we weren't being particularly transparent, and we didn't allow people to participate in our processes. I don't want to say that they were a secret, but we didn't make them well known. I still come across in our dealings when we talk about odd development things where a policy is produced that was drafted in 2007 and signed by so-and-so, that when we look at today, we go, well, who ever saw this policy? And it would be a very small group of developers or a community association or something. But what we decided to do is create a new system called green notices. And it may sound a little odd. What is a green notice? And it is the Office of Planning and Zoning's official way of sharing with, I'm going to say, the public. And the public includes all of our clients. It's the development community, it's residents, it's business owners, it's everybody. When we're making an interpretation of the code, whether it's an existing code or something new like the tree bill, when we're creating a policy to deal with conflicts in codes, or when we're going to do something new that may be consistent with the code that we haven't done in the past. So we started officially our first, I'm going to say, flurry of them around the first of the year, immediately following the tree bill's passage. And there were several areas within that tree bill that needed further interpretation, further explanation. And we did, and I'm just going to throw a couple names out, but we did them for preserving priority forest retention areas, fulfilling afforestation, reforestation requirements, how we calculate afforestation, reforestation. It's one thing to draft a law and adopt it, but different readers of the law can reasonably come to different interpretations at times. So we tried to ask all of the right questions of ourselves so that we could produce policy documents that would help all of our clients, including the public, understand how we were going to implement those laws. I think it worked very, very well, and it was instrumental in allowing us to begin implementing a very complicated and very different tree bill than the one that previously existed. We're using it to provide guidance to developers on identifying and showing existing conditions and natural resources on sketch and preliminary plans. How we deal with non-tidal wetlands. How we deal with mitigation in general. Keep in mind, we talked about modifications, and for the public who are listening in who don't really know what modifications are, they're a unique thing to Anne Arundel County. Basically what it is, it allows someone to apply for a modification, which is in essence, not following the law without getting a variance by the Board of Appeals or the hearing examiner. And we've had this system in place for decades in Anne Arundel County. There have been many thousands of modification applications submitted over the years, and our best guess is about 96% of those were approved over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You know, when the county executive came into office with your administration, you were aware of that issue. You created some policies yourself that influenced how we would look at environmental modifications, and we've applied those to a variety of the green notices. And one of the things that we try and do, and I'm going to give a specimen tree issue as a perfect example. We rank them, poor, mid-level quality or high quality, depending on a variety of criteria. And over the years, many developers have asked to remove a specimen tree because it would be in the way of development. And historically, we almost always granted those. We don't do that every day anymore through the modification process. Many of those are denied, or the development is redesigned because I think the development community understands the county administration's guidance to the Office of Planning and Zoning and then implemented through the green notices, that it's less likely it's going to happen. But if it does, if there is merit in granting it, we now have a series of criteria we apply for what we call mitigation. The idea is that if the modification is going to be granted on an environmental feature, then the end result is the environment has to be improved as a result of the development from its pre-development stages. I know that sounds complicated, but that's kind of explained in some of the green notices that help explain to everybody how we're going to be looking at things. Where before, we would see multiple examples where we moved very far left, very far right. We weren't consistent in the way that we applied things. The other thing I think that's important is, and we've touched on this, COVID-19 has affected everything, everything. Who would have thought 6 months ago, a year ago, that we would be essentially a virtual office where in any given day, 90–95% of our workforce is working from home on laptops and computers, where staff would be coming into the office only for the purpose of picking up plans and plats and permits to take home to be able to review them safely. So we created a series of green notices to explain how our operations would be affected, what would be occurring with our committees, our commissions, our appointed groups. Keep in mind that we have a GDP, Citizen Advisory Commission, that wasn't able to meet for a couple of months simply because of COVID. And we had to come up with a way for these various commissions and appointed boards to be able to meet remotely. Not always easy to do. Not everybody has the technology. Not everybody has the training. So we've provided some guides for that purpose through the green notices. We've also found that we have not historically always applied the code correctly. And I'm looking at my screen at some of my staff. We went astray over the years in not necessarily always applying the code correctly and consistently.
Are you looking at Kelly because she's been there the longest?
Yeah.
And
but it's a true thing. And it happens to all planning agencies unless they're really, really diligent. So we're using green notices to explain to the development community and to the public where we've shifted. The fact that we're no longer reading the code ABC, now it's DEF. Not always well received because it affects projects in the process, but that's one of the things we're trying to do. And I think the last is, Christina gave a very, very good overview of the virtual community meetings. In order to, I'm going to say, pull that off, how do we explain that to the public on what we're going to do? Well, she drafted a green notice that explained it to everybody. And there's been multiple questions that have come in, but the end result of the process that was developed in using the green notice, we now have much greater participation and much greater transparency in what we do, which was always the goal. So
and let me just note on these notices that we also have in your, I guess you could say, your sister agency inspections and permits, blue notices to do the same thing, so that everybody knows how the rules are being interpreted, and and it creates the consistency that prevents shady deals, shady land deals, we call them.
So I should also tell you that when we're going to develop a green notice, there is participation from all of the land use agencies, Public Works, the Office of Transportation, Inspection Permits, and the administration, and always the Office of Law.
Our environmental policy director is always there, Matt Johnston.
Yes.
Yep.
We have regularly scheduled meetings with that individual. We will be meeting again this Friday, and we have very interesting and heady conversations. So there's great, I'm going to say, coordination. There are times when we debate if there is a policy that materially affects more than one of our agencies, that we may need to do some form of like rainbow style notice that includes everybody. They all have a different color, but the point is, when all of us speak with one voice, our ability to be consistent and clear is improved for everybody. So it's very good point you brought up.
All right. So let's see, we're about 10 minutes left, which we can stretch to 15 or a little bit more if we need to, since we don't have commercials and we're not on network television. But we should keep things moving here. So Lori Rhodes is going to talk to us about changes to the code that in order to implement the general development plan, in order to make sure that we're managing growth in the county, that land use laws are make any sense at all.
Right.
It's no fun enforcing laws that don't make sense, and times change and laws need to change. So Laura, you've been with the department for 20 years or 20 years in the field.
I've actually worked in the zoning division for over 20 years, but I've been with Anne Arundel County for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
I actually started out as the main receptionist. So I, clawed my way to the top, went back to school. So, I mean, I've dealt with customers, every aspect of planning and zoning that you can think of. But
and
yeah,
I see your degree is well, you got your bachelor's in public administration and then a minor in environmental studies. So you're also another tree hugger. Okay.
Tree hugger. Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Rhodes. I'm the Assistant Planning and Zoning Officer. As the county executive indicated, I'm in charge of overseeing the land use codes and making sure they're amended to implement the general development plan. And so since Steve Kaiser's been in the office, I mean, I haven't even batted an eye. I mean, we've been working really hard to make sure that we're addressing inconsistencies in our code. Right now, I'm charting all of the inconsistencies that are found in Article 17 and 18. I'm planning a phased update that's going to be almost a complete rewrite. We're going to revisit our definitions, clarify any vague definitions, also add definitions to distinguish similar.
I hope Councilman Volke is listening. Our councilman of definitions.
He'll be very happy. He will be very happy. I mean, because the goal is, of course, to implement the plan, but also to make sure the code is simple, that any ordinary person can look at it and read it. And I know I've got my work cut out for me because, looking at the solar energy provisions, I know I have to take a relook at that because you have to read that a couple times to understand it, but also know that, we need to make sure we have protections in place for preserving neighborhoods. Also, I've been attending some CAC meetings and, some questions have been asked about, well, what are you doing about form-based zoning? So of course, my staff, we're researching some of the smart codes, figuring out how those tools can be implemented into our code to make it more of a hybrid code. Anne Arundel County zoning code is predominantly Euclidean, meaning uses are separated based on its intensity and density. And of course, we want to continue to preserve and protect those neighborhoods. But I'm very excited with the work that I've done thus far. I've been looking and working with the farming community. So we have a bundle of ag bills that we drafted and we're looking forward to them going forward. The agricultural community is a viable industry in Anne Arundel County. We need to be looking for opportunities to help them to have economic diversification. So we're looking at special events, farm weddings, farm stays. We're also going to have the follow-on provisions to help them implement these uses, which will be the site development plan provisions. There needs to be exceptions to allow these farmers who want to start something new to maintain their farm. So we have multiple provisions to the site development plan and development codes to facilitate that, as well as help the developers understand the timing of certain applications so it will reduce some modifications. Those are some of the things that we're looking at. And of course, the signature tree bill. That's something that we're very excited.
Most of us call it forest conservation, but I know in your office that's too many syllables.
That was awesome. I mean, because I felt really bad to read in the paper that we were the leading county with forest loss. So with that bill, we've reversed that trajectory, and we're now retaining more forest. We have definitions that align with the state, so I'm happy with that. Also, I don't know if you recall, publicity hounds, the issue that we had off of Rossback Road, where we had to change the definition of private clubs. So that's another way that you can use zoning code. In that case, there was a LLC proposing to have a dog park under the definition of a private club, but it was going to be open to the public. So that's another example where you can amend the zoning code to address an issue to not allow a use that's inappropriate in a certain location. That would have been drawing traffic on a scenic and historic road, and it would have undermined the intent of private clubs. So that's another way that you can use zoning to address issues.
And I found it interesting that there's always opposition to every change in legislation and support, and that generally the opponents of whatever it is, whether it was the workforce housing bill or the tree bill, or will say, oh, we shouldn't be doing any code changes until after the general development plan, or maybe it'd be after the regional or after something else. And I just want to say my own view, and I know the view of this office, is that I think your comment was that it's got to be organic. It has to be responsive to needs.
Yes.
And when we know something should happen that makes our county a better place and makes it more possible to do smart growth and smart land use.
Which is why you need hybrid codes. You need to have multiple tools at your disposal to do the things that the code charges us to do. And that's why you have to have those incentives to allow more density for certain types of uses for workforce housing. That's an incentive zoning to provide for affordable housing in the zoning code.
So I have a little bit of a reputation as a tree hugger, I guess, as well. And some would say that I'm anti-development, or I guess that's the word that some would use. And I try to argue back and say, no, that's not really the case. Especially since I support affordable housing and housing at various prices, so that our kids and our parents and everybody in our communities can afford to live. But what I keep saying over and over again, and I think a lot of people get this, is that we have to do smart growth. We want development to happen where there's infrastructure. We want to get cars off the road. We want to be able to preserve open space by building communities that people can live and work and play, so they don't have to drive everywhere. So I know that our council chairwoman, Allison Pickard, has been working for quite some time. She represents Glen Burnie on legislation that would allow redevelopment to happen in Glen Burnie in ways that it's been stymied in the past. And I don't know how far you want to get into that. We probably don't have time to get very far into that. But that, to me, that's legislation that will be coming to the council. And I think it will be supported, I would hope, by everybody on the council. But it's taken a lot of work. Do you want to say anything about that kind of legislation?
Yes, again, that's another way in which you can use the zoning code as a tool to implement the policies that are in the code. Redevelopment is something that we want over green infrastructure development. So we had to come up with a bill that was flexible enough to encourage redevelopment in those areas. And so that's why I believe that bill, as drafted, provides that flexibility, also provides opportunity for the community to have a say in the process, and they're going to be using 3D imagery. That's another example of flexibility, and also providing those tools that are needed in the code to allow those types of developments to occur.
And I know there's a very early on community engagement piece in that bill, so that the community, and then community benefits that get described early on, and then so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works. And hopefully, if it works in Glen Burnie, we can do it elsewhere as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward to being a rep on that bill, so I can explain the different techniques that you can use in zoning to do those types of things, incentivize, which is what that bill does. in those areas where we want redevelopment to occur.
And that bill may have been introduced last night.
Yes,
Oh,
it
it
was.
was. Okay, I'm
It
sorry.
was. It was
Okay.
introduced last night,
All right,
and I
so it
do
will be
have the
heard
bill number. It's
after the
6420.
6420, so people can go read it.
6420
Good.
is the
So
bill number.
it's
Yep.
moving. Yep.
Yes, and I will be looking at that, making sure I'm prepared for the questions and, to answer any questions about why we're doing it, how it's
Good.
different from strictly Euclidean
Yes.
zoning, and that it's legal, and all of the questions that may be asked
Yeah.
on that.
Anybody who watches county council meetings sees a lot of Lori Rhodes up there.
I was
answering
there last
questions
night. I should have remembered. Yeah, that bill
with a smile,
I try.
no matter
But
how late
I'm
in the
really
evening it
looking
gets.
forward to our phased update of the code. It's going to be great. We want to tackle some of those tough issues such as cluster development. I don't know if you heard from some members, but the
Oh,
current provisions aren't working. So we
Right.
need to go back and look at what worked, go out and look at those developments that did work,
Yep.
and then start from scratch to say, what do we need to do to build upon to make it a conservation subdivision, which is what it was intended to be.
So we have two more areas to cover quickly here. There's work that we're doing on school and transportation adequate public facilities laws as a work group. And then there's the process of development review that Kelly Krynes will talk about. So APF, take it away. Keep it brief.
I will.
SKZ.
I will try and be brief. So the administration, working with the county council, established about 6 months ago 2 work groups. One of the work groups was for school adequate public facilities. The other was transportation and APF. And what they did was they asked for volunteers, and I was volunteered to lead the school APF component, where Chris Phipps, the director of DPW, is leading the transportation group. Each group has had 3 to 4 meetings. We're at the point on the school APF side where we're getting into the meat. This Thursday, we will have our 4th meeting. We're going to be reviewing, I believe there are 3 pending county council sponsored school APF bills. One has been introduced, at least. The other 2 may not have been, but the council members had asked us to have the group review those, which we're going to do. But the next part of the meeting, and it will probably end up being a 2-part meeting, is we have other things that we really need to debate and come to hopefully some conclusions on. When development projects should vest, meaning when are they set aside for having school capacity assigned to their projects? The way that we
And
test.
just for people who don't follow this sort of thing, that a development is not allowed to proceed, a residential development, unless it's for seniors. Assumption is that there will be kids involved living in those homes, unless there's capacity in the schools. So,
Correct.
but it's a
And
complicated
the way-
system. But
The way it works is if one of an elementary, middle, or high school within a feeder system is closed, the entire feeder system is closed.
right. So there are
we
parts
have-
of the county where development, where we may actually think that development should happen because there's a train station or something else, and it's
Correct.
smart growth. But if that feeder system is closed, then it's closed.
One of the issues with the way we've done this business over the years, it's created an enormous, I'm going to say, number of vacant school seats within the entire system. It's a very large number. And we need to be looking at that because we have a lot of unused capacity.
Over
That-
10,000, right?
It's about 10,326. It's a very large number of excess school seats within the entire system. So we're
At the
sitting
same
on
time,
capacity.
that we're building new schools.
Correct. So one of the things that's going to happen is there's going to have to be a real discussion about how we currently do redistricting and how we need to do it in the future. The other thing that's going to play a major role, obviously the administration and the council have a vested interest in seeing workforce housing and appropriate affordable housing occur within the county. Very difficult to do that now with the number and location of our closed school districts. These are the issues we're wrestling there. On the transportation side, there's a lot of math involved. There's a lot of highway capacity, different ways of rating roads, much more, in my mind, complicated. But we're wrestling with how do we influence transportation APF in the environment where we have such high levels of congestion, in particular on state roads like Route 2 and Route 3. So that's a very brief update of these two work groups. Very interesting work to be involved in. I can say on the school adequate public facility side, it's my goal as we reach our conclusions, assuming we can reach a consensus, that we're anticipating putting pen to paper and drafting legislation that can be considered by all. The next thing, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, let me just say on adequate public facilities that how important that is. I mean, it's been incredibly frustrating to me that you could have an area, for instance, Crofton, Route 3, areas, Route 2, where you have failing intersections clearly, which means that the public facilities are not adequate for new development, for additional traffic. And our county is weak on that. Other counties have better systems, better APF laws. And I know that, and even our impact fees on transportation were set at about half of what they were recommended to be 10 years ago, or it's been more than 10 years now. And so $107 million in impact fees for transportation funding didn't happen because the council at that time didn't want the impact fees on the development to be too high. So we have not addressed traffic issues in our county very well. We have to do that, and strengthening our adequate public facilities laws and potentially our impact fees on transportation.
Correct.
I know you're doing a study to make that possible. We have to get the data. Really, really important. And then I just also want to say on the workforce housing, because I know that some people don't see that as necessarily particularly important. Why do we need more housing, period? Why does it need to be workforce? Think about the fact that our economy has to have teachers and firefighters and people who work in our retail operations and people who cut grass and people who do all the jobs in our county who don't get paid a whole lot. And every economy has this. And if we don't have housing that those folks can afford, that means that they're driving in and driving out every single day. And we already know that a lot of our current residents drive in and out to get to work. So we have incredible amounts of traffic that we don't need to have. And if we have housing for every income level, every job level, we're reducing traffic. So enough of my speech on that.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to go super fast through development because I want to end with Kelly on a particular subject.
Okay.
And I'm going to label this part how we do development review. Has it changed? Yeah, I think we have changed a significant amount in my relatively short time here. Part of it is, though, simply a greater awareness in applying the code as it's written. Keep in mind, our land use laws, our regulations, are laws that are adopted by the county council. They are the law of the land. And it's really not for the staff to not implement them correctly. If I understand, if we don't like them, they're in error or they need to be changed, that's what we should do. We shouldn't just decide not to apply them. My perspective is there were many cases over the years, whether it was doing school or transportation APF, a lot of different things that we simply didn't apply the code correctly. And I think, Kelly, I'm hoping she'll nod her head, but that we're doing that much more successfully. It kind of drives the development community nuts because their perspective is, now you're reinterpreting. And it's like, no, what we're admitting to is we didn't do it correctly, but we are now. So that's a major thing. The other one I would say, and you've all touched on it, COVID has changed the way we do operations. One is that all of our meetings now are virtual. We save so much time through virtual meetings versus in-person meetings. It's staggering. Who would have thought that that would be an outcome? But it's real. The other one, and Boss, you touched on this, COVID has changed traffic, both volumes and patterns. So we have less congestion on the road. And with less congestion, our air quality improves. Those are two, I'm going to say, very positive outcomes of COVID, not taking away from the fact that our meetings are more productive. We've touched on this before. Modifications, we do them fundamentally differently now than we did in the past. But Kelly can attest to you, I have 3 planning administrators in different areas doing development review and managing groups doing development review. My planning administrators spend about 40% of their time on modifications, which is a legal way to request relief from the law. We spend a lot of time on this. And we are changing our way and our pattern of reviewing modifications. It's not uncommon for us to get now input from other agencies where it didn't always happen. We've also found that there were modifications we were granting that we didn't have any legal authority to grant. I won't go into the details, but it really comes back around of applying the law the way it's written. What it means is that the Office of Transportation and/or Inspections and Permits and/or Department of Public Works have the really more of the final say in certain types of modifications, for example, to the design manual. I might make a final decision on some of those, but now I have their subject matter expertise to help guide that decision. And I'm also going to say, just again, we've touched on this, the green notices have provided us a vehicle to explain our thinking processes where that really didn't exist before. And if anybody's interested, it's so easy to get to the green notices. For me, it's a fun read. You'll see a lot of thought went into it, but if you can't find a link, or just go Anne Arundel County green notices, and it's the first thing that'll pop up, and it's just a fun read. The last thing I want to do is there's a pretty big project underway in the county, and it's an environmental project, but it deals with mapping, and it's not zoning. So Kelly, would you mind sharing where we're at in the critical area mapping process?
Sure.
And Kelly, since you've been around for 30 years, since you were like a teenager, right? You tell us if anybody has misspoken here in the last hour, and whether things have changed, with the historical perspective. Feel free to comment on that as well.
Yeah. I think what has become really obvious in watching what everybody said in this presentation to me is that the difference is we've identified issues or improvements or questions, and we've come up with a solution, and we've done it pretty quickly. In the past, we might have talked about what we could do differently. Maybe we would get to it, maybe we wouldn't. And the number of things that we have accomplished in a very short time, the amount of legislation that we've introduced, the things we've done with technology, the mapping, the ability to work from home and to be able to do different things like that. It's very proactive, and it's just very exciting. If something's wrong, we do a green notice. And if we do need legislation, we'll get to that, but it's making the changes that need to be made to make things better. And it's pretty exciting to be a part of that. And I've been doing this, like you said, for a really long time, more than half my life. It's exciting to be part of this right now. So, but to my project that I'm supposed to be talking about, okay. The critical area mapping. So my name's Kelly Krinitz. I'm the planning administrator for the critical area team. And we are currently involved with the Critical Area Commission on a state mandated critical area map update. Last fall, anyone whose property was going into the critical area would have received notification from the Critical Area Commission, and they were invited.
The critical area, for people who don't know, is how many feet from the water?
1,000 feet from tidal waters or tidal wetlands.
Okay.
So they would have received the state directive was to notify people who were going into the critical area. They were invited to one of several meetings that we held to go over how that would impact their property and any projects they might have. The county has decided to go a step further and to also notify anyone who's coming out of the critical area, because we felt like that's just as important. If in the past you weren't able to do something, or the critical area legislation affected your property, you should know that there's a change now. So we're in the process of getting ready to notify everybody that's coming out of the critical area. Once that happens, we will introduce the legislation to actually adopt the maps. We're hoping to have that ready in the fall, but timing will be dictated by council and other things. So the commission gives us 2 years to adopt those new maps. We're hoping to do it much sooner than that because it's important to be working with accurate boundaries and making decisions based on the current information and not data that's, 20 years old.
Wow, exciting. So, well, now you warned me, Steve, that doing this and then having a lot of questions and answers all in an hour was going to be not likely to too much to cover. So people who have sent in questions, we'll get back with answers. And we may do this again to be able to get to some of those questions. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff we've accomplished. And I think probably what people want to talk about is the things they'd like to see us still accomplish that we haven't yet. So we'll do this soon and get to some of that. Maybe by then we'll have accomplished all of it at the rate you're going. But this has been really fun, and it is really amazing how much your team has accomplished in the last year or 6 months even. It's really exciting to see. So I hope everybody out there is going to dig in and use these tools that we told you about and get involved in protecting our open space and making sure that growth and development in this county goes where it should go and benefits the people. So thank you.
Thank you.